after.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. We're going to be talking about pediatric obesity today with pediatrician Eric Colgrove. And I don't think there's anybody that's new. I don't think I see any new names, but if you're new, why don't you unmute and let us know how you found out about the classes if you're willing. Otherwise, we probably have everybody that's been here before. Anyone have any questions, comments, anything they want to share before we start? Joan.
I'm really liking the book.
Oh, for the book club. Yeah. Good.
Yeah,
I read that one last year. It was good.
What do you like about it?
Information that I didn't know.
About sleep?
Yeah, about sleep. Recently, it was talking about the importance of REM sleep in the developing fetus and how much REM sleep they get just prior to birth because it's laying down all these neural pathways.
Yeah, so cool.
And and it shows you, how important that gestation period is.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah, newborn infants are just REM sleeping all the time. It's just crazy. You can see their eyes moving and they're just faces little twitching and moving. It's cool. All right, should we go ahead and start or?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Find the bags.
What's that? What's that? Okay, I want to share screen. Share. All right, can you see that okay?
Yes.
Nice. Okay. Hey there. I'm Eric Colgrove. I've been a pediatrician for 26 years, and I'm very happy to present again tonight. Thanks for making the time to be here. It really just makes such a difference to have some people. I know we don't have a big crowd here tonight, but thank you for those who came. It really does help. I want to make this more interactive if I can. Ask questions at any point. But tonight we're definitely going to be discussing some. The topic is really childhood obesity. So we'll talk about some of the things that have really changed and what we're doing all over the country now, which is a little disconcerting ourselves. So I'll talk about that. Yep. Slide thing. Okay. So the prevalence of overweight, including obesity. So basically, obesity is a subset of overweight. Overweight is a bigger group of kids, and obesity is even a smaller, more heavier group of kids. But both of those among children and adolescent age 5 to 19 really have risen dramatically in just from just 8% in 1990 to 20% in 2022. And the rise is about the same in both boys and girls. So it's about 20% for both. Yeah, I'll show you slides. Yeah, here's that. Just briefly, I don't want you to look at it too carefully, but it actually doesn't include all the recent data, but this graph just shows the massive rise since the 1970s. So this goes back to 1963. and shows you how it really changed in the 70s. Something happened in the 70s. So, you know, what was going on in the 70s for that to happen? Let's watch a Gregor video that talks about what happened. So we're gonna play number 1, Scott. No, I switched it to you, right? I do. Let's see. Ooh, 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 ooh. That's not right. Anyway, I stopped share. That's right. I stopped share. I gotta get my brain going on how to. Yeah. Trying to figure out where that. Oh, what's over here? Sorry. Ah, there it is. So stop share is. Where is the stop share? I'm looking all over. End. Okay. I think it's end. No, that's in the meeting. Share screen. Where's the stop share button?
You're muted, Scott.
Oh, yeah. So you click on the 3 little dots over my picture.
Over your
And
picture.
then, yeah, I think that's where you can make me host.
You don't have 3 little dots. You're the big. I make you host. See, you're a big picture, you know, a little picture.
Oh,
Somebody else, no, Scott, Charlie, talk. Say something, Charlie.
Okay.
There we go. That's it. The dots would only come up when Charlie talked. Scott, don't talk. Make host. Okay. There we go, Shane. Yeah, it's a little clunky. Okay.
all right. Let me share screen. Optimize video. Okay, so you can see my screen.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, number 1.
Or you could go ahead and go through it.
The rise in the number of calories provided by the U.S. food supply since the 1970s is more than sufficient to explain the entire obesity epidemic. Similar spikes in calorie surplus were noted in developed countries around the world in parallel with, and presumed primarily responsible for, the expanding waistlines in their populations. By the year 2000, the United States was producing, after exports taken into account, 3,900 calories for every man, woman, and child, nearly twice as much as many people need. It wasn't always this way. The number of calories in the food supply actually declined over the first half of the 20th century, only starting its upward climb to unprecedented heights in the 1970s. The drop in the first half of the century was attributed to the reduction in hard manual labor. The population had decreased energy needs, so they ate decreased energy diets. They didn't need all the extra calories. But then the so-called energy balance flipping point occurred, when the move less, stay lean phase that existed through most of the century turned into the eat more, gain weight phase that plagues us to this day. So, what changed? What happened in the 1970s was a revolution in the food industry. In the 1960s, most food was prepared and cooked in the home. The average quote-unquote not working wife spent hours a day cooking and cleaning up after meals. The husband averaged 9 minutes. But then a mixed blessing transformation took place. Technological advances in food preservation and packaging enabled manufacturers to mass prepare and distribute food for ready consumption. The metamorphosis has been compared to what happened a century before in the Industrial Revolution, with the mass production and supply of manufactured goods. This time they were just mass-producing food, using new preservatives, artificial flavors, and techniques such as deep freezing and vacuum packaging. Food corporations could take advantage of economies of scale to mass produce ready-made, durable, palatable edibles that offered
Did it
an
work?
enormous commercial advantage over fresh and perishable foods. Right? Think ye of the Twinkie. Look, with enough time and effort, any ambitious
They got
cook
their own?
could create a cream-filled cake, but now they're available around every corner for less than $1, or even delivered straight to your door for 30 cents. Right? If every time someone wanted a Twinkie, they had to bake it themselves, they'd probably eat a lot less Twinkies. Right? The packaged food sector is now a multi-trillion-dollar industry. Or consider the humble potato. We've long been a nation of potato eaters, but they were largely baked or boiled. Right? Anyone who's made fries from scratch knows what a pain it is, right? With all the peeling, cutting, and splattering. Right? But with sophisticated machinations of mechanization, French fry production became centralized and could be shipped at negative 40 degrees to any fast food deep fat fryer or frozen food section in the country to become America's favorite vegetable. Right? Nearly all the increase in potato consumption in recent decades has been in the form of French fries and potato chips. Cigarette production offers a compelling parallel. Up until automated rolling machines were invented, cigarettes had to be rolled by hand. It took 50 workers to produce the same number of cigarettes a machine could make in a minute. The price plunged, and production leapt into the billions. Cigarette smoking went from relatively uncommon to almost everywhere. Right? In the 20th century, the average per capita cigarette consumption rose from 54 a year to 4,345 cigarettes a year by the time the 1964 Surgeon General's report. The average American went from smoking about 1 cigarette a week to a half pack a day. And tobacco itself was just as addictive before and after mass marketing. What changed was cheap, easy access. Right? French fries have always been tasty, but they went from being rare, even in restaurants, to omnipresent access around each and every corner, likely next to the gas station where you can get your Twinkies and cigarettes. But look, the first Twinkie dates back to 1930. Though, and Ore-Ida started selling frozen French fries in the 1950s. I mean, there has to be more to the story than just technological innovation, which we'll explore next.
All right.
Do you want me to go back to you?
Yeah, give it back to me if you
Okay.
could.
I did not.
Make sure everybody's muted.
Yeah. Can I mute folks?
Oop. No. Share screen again, just a second.
Comprehensive dietary program to treat chronic kidney disease. And
Yeah, I don't know why it's a little
It
pointy.
always wants to play. Okay,
Yeah.
get back to this. Put this back over here. Stop share.
Right.
And then I click on, I guess someone else needs to speak. Okay, there you are. And then I can click on the show, make host. All right, I made you host again.
Okay. Well, yeah. I don't know if anyone saw today's video, but it talks about another thing that happened, and that was the rise of tens of billions of dollars being poured into marketing, and that was the other. So, has anyone seen the video today? That's a video from just today. So you'll have to watch it yourselves. I put it in the end of my talk. If we happen to have time, we can watch this. It's kind of a longer one. It's like 11 minutes. So, but it's just, it kind of talks about one more thing that happened. So here he talks about automation being a big thing, automation of processed foods. And if you can imagine, you just can't have the same kind of thing with fresh foods. It's what it was. Everyone thought the convenience of these processed foods was just king. That that's just an amazing thing, right? So, let me share my screen again. Right. Yep. Okay. And okay. So this graph is of adult obesity. One of the problems is that unhealthy weight is so common. So it's become normalized in our country because it's so common. And I actually have parents that complain that their children are too skinny when actually, they say they don't eat enough and they're too skinny. And despite their BMI and the growth charts, perfectly normal and actually average. So sometimes they'll even be on the heavier side and they'll be complaining. It's gotten that ridiculously common that and you know, I see a lot of parents who complain about their kids not eating enough.
Howdy.
That's a really common.
No. Breeds.
If you could mute your phones or your devices if you can. I don't know. How do I mute someone? I think this is iPhone. Oh, I can mute. There we go. All right. So yeah, so you know, our main job as parents is to grow our children up to be from small little babies to being full grown, independent adults. And so what becomes really important is I gotta grow my child, and that means I gotta feed my child. And so that becomes a chronic kind of concern of parents of how do I get my kids to eat? When in fact, kids will eat just the right amount. Give them healthy food. They're gonna eat what their body wants to eat. So I do a lot of reassuring and telling parents that don't worry, he or she is not going to starve to death. Of course, I follow the growth and make sure they're not having some kind of failure to thrive thing. So that's going to be important, making sure of that. Let me go. This video is a very simple PBS video that I don't know if it was made for kids or what, but anyways, I want to go ahead. This is going to be number 2, Scott. I'm going to stop share and make sure you don't click on the videos box. Make sure you click on the blue line that says supersized kids. Okay.
Okay.
Comes
Okay.
up upper left. It makes a difference from where it starts. So I need to stop share. It is stop share. And then I need to make you the host. Wait, Charlie, say something.
You're
Charlie
muted, Charlie. You're muted, Charlie.
or Joan, you can say something, Joan.
Okay, I'm saying something.
Great. For some reason, that pulls up the dots. Weird. Because
Now I'm host. Share my screen. Go here. So click on this, our supersized kids.
yeah, number 2, yeah.
Is
You
thin
hear
going extinct? Nearly a third of our children are
You guys hearing it okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
'Cause I didn't know if I had to hit the share thing again, but I obviously don't. Okay, here we go.
overweight or obese, and the numbers continue to rise. Childhood obesity is a serious epidemic. We're at risk of raising supersized kids who may live sicker and die younger than the generation before them.
Because at younger and younger ages, we're starting to see children with significant medical complications related to being obese. Type 2 diabetes, hypertension, elevated cholesterol. These are illnesses that we hadn't seen under age 20 before.
With so many of us being overweight these days, sometimes being fat looks, well, normal. But it's not, and it's dangerous. An overweight child usually grows up to be an obese adult.
We're in the midst of an epidemic of obesity in this country between fast foods and greasy foods and sugary drinks.
If we don't change what we do, we will be a society of obese people. I don't think anybody wants that.
It's very scary and it's very real. That's why we need to do something about it now.
Is it baby fat or what? How do you know if your child is a healthy weight? This is the Cordero family. 10-year-old Elijah has always been a big boy.
I had always thought he was bigger, but I didn't really think that there was a problem.
We didn't have much food growing up. I figured if they had a full belly, they'd be happy, you know?
I guess I always thought he was big boned. I just thought, you know, he's eating every meal. It's good.
Here's his growth chart. You can see how his...
A doctor's visit told a different story. Elijah's body mass index, or BMI, showed his weight was growing faster than his height. A BMI is a simple height-to-weight ratio that provides a useful snapshot of whether a child is overweight for his or her age.
I was shocked. I guess I just didn't realize, you know, what we were doing to him.
A BMI above the 85th percentile indicates a child is overweight. It means the child weighs more than 85% of their peers. Above 95% means the child is obese.
The borderline diabetes is what scared me the most. And I just thought, you know, I don't want him to have to give himself shots every day and watch what he eats every, you know, I mean, you can't go back.
Can't fix it.
The Corderos are not alone. Most parents don't realize their child is overweight or how serious it is. Sometimes the chubby kid may not stand out in our overweight society.
And it's kind of hard to accept that more than half the people that we meet every day are either overweight or obese.
Many parents think their child will grow into the extra weight. Sometimes that's true, but 75% of the time it is not. 2 out of 3 overweight 10-year-olds will grow up to be obese adults.
I think in the past, a lot of people used to think, oh, they'll just grow out of it. But what we're seeing now is that kids don't grow out of it. They become obese adolescents, they become obese young adults, they become obese adults.
What we need to realize is that it didn't happen in 1, 2, 3, or even 5 years. It started when the kids were 2, 3, a year old. And that's the urgency.
Did you know our genes are not our destiny? 9-year-old Anna Oda loves guinea pigs and doing crafts with her mom. But life hasn't always been so happy. 2 years ago, Anna was very upset about her weight.
She would come home and cry because kids would call her fat. Not only that, though, this little girl told Anna that she was too heavy to sit on Santa's lap.
And you actually have several years.
A visit to the doctor confirmed her fears. Anna was overweight and a borderline diabetic.
Her dad has diabetes, her grandpa has diabetes, and my mom has diabetes. And I was really worried because, I mean, if Anna's that big at that age, how much bigger is she going to get? How many more health problems is she going to have?
All right, so Anna, go ahead and step up on this.
Anna was lucky because they caught her weight problem early while she was still growing.
Prevention is key, because if we can catch these children when they are in the category of being overweight, catch them early and really enforce the principles of healthy eating and exercise, food portions, then most of these children still have lots of time to grow.
The goal is to slow down the weight gain and let the height catch up as the child grows. While Anna is younger and still growing, nature is working right along with her. It's much more difficult after puberty.
It is critical that we address these issues at as young an age as possible, and we are working with the body's physiology.
Many obese adolescents were obese children. If you go back and look at their growth charts, you can see that they were already above the 95th percentile when they were 2 or 3. They've already had a decade of obesity.
Right.
There. And right, your host again, Eric.
Okay, thanks. Okay, well, and let's pause here and see if we can answer any questions that people have. That's kind of the basic information so far. We've talked about how there's a sudden rise in obesity. This kind of talks about how it kind of looks like when people come to clinic and when it happens in the family. So the basics. This is the basics of what obesity looks like. Any questions about that? We'll get more into the what's going on nationally, which is actually a really important discussion. So I'm gonna get that going. All right. All right. Well, here's a visual I found for risk factors for pediatric diabetes, and I was wondering if anyone sees the missing link here. Take a look at this. So you've got the biological, you got stress and depression, as a link, and you've got psychological as a link, which is really very similar, but well, yeah. Then you've got psychosocial as a link and social. What other risk factor? It's probably should be right there in the center of this thing.
Nutrition.
Yes, nutrition, right? Yes. It's the types of foods that people are eating. But yeah, really broadly, it's nutrition. It's a huge link. I mean, we're talking about risk factors for pediatric obesity. It's not even on there. They do talk about eating behaviors in the psychological section, it says, but that's different. Eating behaviors. You're saying that a bigger risk than your nutrition, your pantry is actually how much you eat or what. But yeah, I think that's a big misjudgment, misthought, is that it's not about how much you eat. So much of what I saw when I was researching this, there was so much talk about getting down portion size. So it really is a big thing. So it's eating behaviors that's in the psychological section. I have no doubt that's prominent in their minds, but it's not prominent in mine. Really, it's all about what you eat, and it's that what we have been taught here in this class is caloric density. It's all about caloric density of our foods. Want to get that caloric density down so you can eat almost as much food as you want, without feeling hungry. Because otherwise, if you're limiting, that's the problem. Okay, so I want to talk about the new guidelines that came out last year from the American Academy of Pediatrics. That's the mother organization for all the pediatricians in the US, including me. So they came out at the beginning of last year with this really important guideline paper. It radically changed how we thought about treating people with obesity. So this is it. And I like this axiom. I want to start by looking at this axiom. If the only tool you have is a hammer, then everything becomes a nail, right? So, here we have childhood obesity. What are we going to do with childhood obesity? We're going to give that child some medicine, a bunch of medicines or surgery. And that's the giant nail to the problem. And that's what people feel like has happened here. So, because in January 2023, the American Academy of Pediatrics issued new guidelines for evaluating managing childhood obesity. And there was really this bench like shock and dismay about the AAP recommendations, because now they include anti-obesity medicines for those as young as 12 and bariatric surgery down to age 13. But these guidelines shouldn't have come as a surprise. The kind of drug and surgical interventions are how doctors have learned to react to disease. And it should come as no surprise. with the growing problem of obesity, that they will wield these hammers, that the hammer of medicine and surgery would come out. And that's exactly what has happened. So these are just a summary of the guidelines, but I want you to focus on the orange area, and that's all about the treatment, particularly the second line in the treatment area. It says that all children over age 6 years of age should, if they're overweight or obese, they should be provided with intense health, behavioral, lifestyle treatment. So that's a fancy way of just saying they should be counseled on nutrition intensely. And they suggest really avoiding, really what they are suggesting is avoiding sugar sweetened beverages, and applying the government MyPlate recommendations. But those two recommendations were not even specifically developed for pediatric weight management. I mean, particularly the MyPlate recommendation. So, you know, they recommend that, but there wasn't a lot of other recommendations or follow up on that suggestion. So they have this gigantic treatment club hammer that they're recommending, but they just don't even talk about it so much. Let me just go to the next slide. So there's one description of the entire paper that talks really about intense health, behavioral, and lifestyle treatment. That's what they call the IHBLT, intense health, behavioral, and lifestyle treatment. And so what they say is that it should include a non-diet lifestyle modification approach that teaches families to set goals for meal preparation, grocery shopping, and learning skills, including portion size and label reading. And studies showed that 26 hours of this intense lifestyle treatment was helpful, but that you needed 52 hours to really be confident that you're getting enough education in them. So 26 hours was good, but 52 hours was significant. And because of the fact that kids are not going to get this kind of intense therapy regularly, the idea is to move up the importance of the medicines and the surgery. I said they're not going to get it because what pediatric clinic, you know, are there really good nutrition clinics that are going to actually provide 26 hours of intense lifestyle treatment, or really 52 hours? Probably not. So I think they recognize that, and they said, you know, people are getting really sick in our society. People are getting sick. How do we move up? How do we prevent this as much as we can? And so the hammer comes out, and what that is they're saying the next thing, if we can't do the counseling, do as much counseling we can, but if that's exhausted, then we'll go to getting the drugs or surgery, and that depends on how obese they are. So these are pretty morbidly obese kids. And I gotta tell you, my 3 o'clock patient today was an 11-year-old, was just under 300 pounds. I mean, so that is significant. I've never met him before. He would easily qualify for surgery. And I don't know if we're going to end up going there, because he also, mom says that she'll buy like a 5-pound bag of oranges and he'll eat all of them like in one sitting. So obviously he's stretched out his stomach, but I have no idea. I mean, obviously I'm not going to jump to surgery. I think some people might. What I would do is really start to get to know this kid. I'll bring him back next month, and we already made some goals about what we can do to cut out some of the extra calories that he's getting. And we didn't really have we talked about other things. He really came in for kind of possible ADHD. So I wasn't even expecting him to talk about this, and bullying. He was being bullied because of his size, if you can imagine. So we spent most of our time on that, and not even getting to this fact. I ordered some labs. He has probably the worst acanthosis nigricans I've ever seen. Acanthosis nigricans is this thick, dark rash, and he had it circumferentially around his neck from front to back. This big, thick, velvety kind of dark rash that means that your pancreas is pooping out from making so much insulin. And so I was checking his risk for diabetes basically with labs today. So all this is coming down today, and of course I'm not going to send him to a surgeon. I'm going to get to know this guy, and hopefully we can turn him around with nutrition. We'll see. I don't have a nutritionist I can send him to, so I got to do it myself. You know,
you can do it. Good work. You can do it, Eric.
Oh man. All right. So, I mean, lifestyle modification in this major paper, they're recommending it should be applauded. Encouraging children to limit portions and check labels sounds like a restrictive diet to me. So I don't know. I'll just those two things, making kids limit their portions and then check labels. It just doesn't jive real well. Yeah, adults can check labels. You know, adults may in certain situations, of course, limit their portion size. But it just struck me as, no, that's not. They're talking about a restrictive diet, and they're saying it in their guidelines. They're saying this is what they're saying. It just seems like a diet to me, and that they're saying that kids shouldn't be put on a diet, really. So why be restrictive when the whole food plant-based diet has been shown to lead to weight loss while encouraging bountiful meals and snacks of the wonderful, colorful plants that we have? So really, that to me is sort of our answer here, is not to give up on our nutrition, but just steer the nutrition in the right way. Don't steer towards restrictive diet and cutting calories, because that's not going to work. You know, kids are gonna sneak that food, or they're gonna whine and whine until parents finally give it to them. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't see it, Joan. Sorry, yeah.
So it seems to me the biggest elephant in the room is parents, grandparents. We all need help with reacting to marketing. Because no matter what we say to the kids and provide for the kids, then they are bombarded, you know, with pictures and yummy, delicious, dripping pictures of great big burgers and fries and pizzas. And, you know, it's a mind thing. And it's too bad they can't have like a video game where they play, like I'm thinking of Novak's kind of thing about choose this or this. How many calories do you think are in this or in this? Mm-hmm. What do you think if you eat this, your body's going to do? If you eat this, what's your body going to do? That could be made into some kind of game and get kids interactive with.
I like it.
Marketing is huge.
Yeah, it is. Okay, if we think about the most important foods that are suited for weight loss, we got to think about what kind of labels are on those foods. Are those labels even on them? No, they don't have labels. We're talking about whole foods. So yeah, I think, let's see, okay, so no, we want to encourage those foods. But yes, definitely the label, the marketing. And they mentioned in that video, they mentioned like $2.2 trillion on the food industry, but so much of that is marketing. Just incredible. So in today's video, it says that 11 billion is put on marketing in this country every year. So the market, 11 billion, I mean, that is, it's hard to imagine. So 1.2 trillion was on that whole, it's a huge market. So that's why they're trying to capture this gigantic market, and they're putting all this pouring money into marketing, and it's just so much easier to market to kids because you stick it on their TV or even their video game stuff, and they just soak it up. And then what do they put all the foods for the kids right at their eye level. So normally you pay for a certain amount of shelf space for the adult eye level, but now they're paying, of course they pay for this kid eye level. And what do the kids do when they see that sugar candy cereal? They are bugging the heck out of the parents. And the parents maybe will say no a couple times, but when it's going on and the kid's whining, it's hard. Hard on those parents. Yeah. So yeah, marketing is gigantic. Let's see, the key to understanding and implementing plant-based recommendations for obesity is the concept of calorie density. See, people tend to eat about the same weight of food every day. It's usually like 2 to 4 pounds per day for an adult. Now, plants have really a lot of 0-calorie fiber and water content, so they offer lower calorie density. Plants can fill a person up without providing excessive calories, and we'll see that. So remember the handout that we have about calorie density. It becomes very obvious that the lower you go, the more on the left, that the more fiber and water are in those foods, and the more filling are at very low calories are those foods. So what happens when we consume extra calories? Well, extra calories are appropriately stored as fat molecules around our body to be accessed if calories ever become scarce. And that's something from our distant past, millions of years ago. We needed a way to store those things. And the people who were able to store foods were the ones that really thrived and lived longer in times of scarcity. So the talent for storing and using excess calories, that evolutionary advantage saved lives back then, but really today, for most of us, calories are constantly within easy reach, and this becomes an adaptation that's becoming a problem, of course, and leading to obesity. So that's what we're seeing. There was oh yeah, I want to talk about a couple different studies that that are relevant here. One of them, researchers were showing how varying researchers really showed how varying calorie density can lead to weight loss without requiring portion control. And one enlightening study enrolled unsuspecting healthy weight women to answer questions about food quality at a buffet. So the women were fed meals ad lib over 2 days and asked about the flavors they tasted, but little did they know the researchers were measuring quantity of food while varying the buffet's calorie density. So it turned out that each woman ate about 3 pounds of food on average per day. So no matter what the calorie density was, they ate about 3 pounds of food per day. Although they ate the same weight of food over the 2 days, the woman at the low calorie density buffet consumed 850 calories less when compared to the women dining at the high calorie density buffet. And then after a week, the low calorie density buffet would yield about 3,000 calories less while still filling the belly. So that's pretty significant. In 1 week, 3,000 calories less eaten. And our lives are really not so different from the experiment. Most of us have easy access to an all-you-can-eat buffet stocked with countless high-calorie density delights, processed foods with added oils and sugars and salt. And, you know, children today can easily take many more calories than their bodies require. When weight loss is the goal, it's unnecessary to shrink the buffet. Instead, we should be switching the buffet to low calorie density foods. So that's one study. The other study was this broad study. So this research group demonstrated weight loss benefits of changing the buffet. This is a great study. The broad study enrolled adults with obesity randomized into two groups. The control group was taught the usual weight loss methods, whereas the other half learned about whole food plant-based diet. This intervention group was instructed to avoid animal products, high-fat plant foods like avocados, and highly processed foods. They were instructed to eat as much as they wanted, but only whole grains, starches, legumes, bread, pasta, potatoes, vegetables, and fruit. And then after 6 months, both cohorts lost weight. The control group participants lost an average of 3.5 pounds, but the individuals in the whole food plant-based group did much better, losing an average of 26 pounds each. So a very powerful study, this broad study. I hadn't heard of it before. So it's an average about 1 pound per week, while all filling up on the malign foods like pasta and potatoes. You know, pasta and potatoes are just looked down on, and we know in the whole food plant-based community that really they could be very, very healthy, very, very good foods. Any other thoughts or questions before I go on?
Yeah, that study was based on the McDougall. They used the McDougall diet for that, and it was conducted in New Zealand.
Oh, it was. Oh, thanks. Yeah, Kristen, I see your hands up.
Hey there. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Kristen.
Hi. Hey, I was thinking about the whole marketing problem, and I have a couple of thoughts about that, because I think that we can use marketing to our advantage, actually, when it comes to helping kids eat healthier. One thought that popped into my head when you were talking about the marketing and the problems with marketing to children is I was at a Winco one time, and I overheard a dad say to his two kids who were in the grocery cart, and he said, "Hey, remember, kids, animals are friends, not food." And it was really sweet and a really lovely statement. But I mean, that's a way of marketing to children, something that they very much can identify with. Kids love animals. They want kittens and dogs and chickens and baby bunnies, and in a way, it's a way of marketing to them how to avoid eating animal-based products by having them identify with animals as pets, or as creatures that they love and they identify with. So that's number one. And then number two, I remember growing up, and this is still to this day, even I do this sometimes with my nieces and nephews, and I shouldn't, but we often use food as treats or as rewards. Yeah. And when I was growing up, taking us to McDonald's or taking us to Dairy Queen was a treat, or A&W, we'd get those root beer floats. That was a treat. And I still think of desserts and things like that as treats, as something that you earn. It's a reward for good behavior or something like that.
Yeah.
And so moving away from using food as a reward system, as you get these foods that are not good for you, as a reward for good behavior, which implies then that the other foods, broccoli, greens, beans, all of the really, really healthy, low calorie dense foods are not treats. That they're just the boring everyday foods that you have to eat. It really conveys the wrong message to these kids. And that's something I still struggle. I still think of desserts and things like that as treats and rewards. So it's something that starts very young. And so we can use marketing in a different way. We can market foods, healthy foods, in a better way to kids.
Yeah. In my own clinic, I do that second approach fairly often. Talk about not using food as a reward. But the first one I love, but how you get that marketing, how do you say, remember kids, animals are our friends, not our food. How do you get that message out there? Because it's that's a very personal thing to say to someone. So I don't feel comfortable saying that in clinic. I wish I did. But how do we get that message across, Kristen?
Right. No, and I'm not sure as a provider that's the appropriate thing to say. Right. It's more from a family standpoint.
Yeah.
If I mean, parents and the entire family have to be in line. That was more of just an example.
Totally. I love it. The issue is when we're talking about marketing, you're talking about marketing to your family, and that's about the size of your market, So,
right.
How do we? It would be nice to figure out how to get that message out there. I just don't know how to do it. I would love to. How do we do that? I mean, that's something to think about, Kristen.
Yes,
I would love to get that message out.
But it does go along with the idea that this has to be a group effort. Like the whole family needs to be on board. Certain members of the family cannot be eating certain foods while the children are supposed to eat other foods. So and I was actually speaking with a pediatrician one time, and we were talking about how in many other countries in the world, in fact, in most other countries in the world, there's no such thing as children's food. They don't have food that's just for kids. The kids eat what the adults eat.
Absolutely.
And it's very, again, getting back to the marketing thing, our country is rather unique, and it's probably spreading to other countries in that we have developed food that is tailored and unique to children only. And in most other countries, the children eat the same things as adults.
Right.
They just maybe smaller portioned, or maybe it's prepared a little bit differently so they can chew it a little easier. But there's no such thing as children's foods and adult foods.
Right. I love that. Food is food. But the other thing I was thinking of, Kristen, is that if Eugene Plant-Based Providers ends up getting a bunch of money, so at some point, wouldn't it be wonderful to make an ad that we could put on Sesame Street or something that says exactly that animals are our friends, not our food. I love that.
Yes, exactly.
What a wonderful ad. So that's our project coming down, not in the next few months, but we can think about maybe a 5-year.
That sounds like a plan.
Goal point. Yeah.
I'm sure the meat and dairy industry gives money to Sesame Street.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. I wonder, I don't know if they take it. That's the thing. I think they only, at least when it was PBS, I don't know. Isn't Sesame Street on HBO now or something? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's on one of those streaming services.
Yeah. All right. So I was looking at that recommendation. They recommended in that paper put out by the AAP a non-diet lifestyle modification approach that teaches families to set goals for meal preparation, grocery shopping, and learning skills, including portion size and label reading. And maybe we should make a change, just that last part. Change it to and fill up on whole plants that have no labels. It just seems like that simply would make a lot more sense to make it that, as opposed to learning skills, including portion size and label reading. I don't think that's what we want. We want the kids to fill up on those, the right pantry.
The left-hand side seems like a diet, which they're saying you
Yeah.
shouldn't put your kids on a diet, like you said.
Yeah. So that right side is what we want to do. Any thoughts about that?
Got to teach it in the schools.
I know. Yeah. Okay, let's do number 3 here. So I'm gonna do another video, diet versus exercise, because this is a huge one. People think that, well, I'll let you watch the movie because it's a really important one. Okay, so how do I do this again? I stop share and I give you the reins. Don't talk, Scott. How do I make posts? Okay. Yes. All right.
Okay. Screen. Go here. 3.
Yeah, number 3.
Obesity isn't new, but the obesity epidemic is. We went from a few corpulent kings and queens like Henry VIII or Louis VI, known as Louis le Gros or Louis the Fat, to a pandemic of obesity now considered to perhaps be the most dire and poorly contained public health threat of our time. About 37% of American men are obese, and 41% of American women, with no end in sight. Earlier reports had suggested at least the rise in obesity was slowing down, but even that doesn't appear to be the case. Similarly, we thought we were turning the corner finally on childhood obesity after 35 years of unrelenting bad news, but the bad news continues. Childhood and adolescent obesity rates have continued to rise now into the 4th decade. Over the last century, obesity appears to have jumped tenfold, from about 1 in 30 to now 1 in 3, but it wasn't a steady rise. Something seems to have happened around the late 1970s, and not just here, but around the globe. The obesity pandemic took off at about the same time across the world in most high-income countries in the 1970s and 1980s. The fact that the rapid rise appeared almost concurrently across the industrialized world suggests a common cause. What might the trigger have been? Any potential driver would have to be global in nature and coincide with the upswing of the epidemic. So the change would have had to start about 40 years ago, and able to spread rapidly around the globe. Let's see how the various theories stack up. For example, some have blamed changes in our built environment, shifts in city planning that have made communities less conducive to walking, biking, grocery shopping. But that doesn't meet our criteria for a credible cause, because there wasn't a universal, simultaneous change in our neighborhoods within that time frame. If you do a survey of hundreds of policymakers, most blame the obesity epidemic on lack of personal motivation. But do you see how little sense that makes? I mean, here in the U.S., for example, right, obesity shot up across the entire population in the late 1970s. Right? Are you telling me that every single sector of the entire population suffered some sort of simultaneous decline in willpower? Every age, sex, and ethnic group, with all their different attitudes and experiences, coincidentally lost their collective capacity for self-control at the same time? I mean, more plausible than a global change in the nature of our characters would be some global change in the nature of our lives. The food industry blames inactivity. If all consumers exercise, said the CEO of PepsiCo, obesity wouldn't exist. Coca-Cola went a step further, spending $1.5 million to create the Global Energy Balance Network to downplay the role of diet. Leaked emails show the company planned on using the front to serve as a weapon to change the conversation about obesity in its war with the public health community. The tactic is so common among food and beverage companies, it even has a name: lean washing. You've heard of greenwashing, where companies deceptively pretend to be environmentally friendly. Well, lean washing is the term used to describe companies that try to position themselves as helping to solve the obesity crisis when they're instead directly contributing to it. Indeed, the largest food company in the world, for example, Nestle, has rebranded itself as the world's leading nutrition, health, and wellness company. Yes, that Nestle, makers of Cookie Crisp and historically more than 100 different brands of candy, including Butterfinger, Kit Kat, Goobers, Gobstoppers, Runts, and Nerds. Another of their slogans is "Good Food, Good Life." Their Raisinets may have some fruit, but they seem to me more Willy Wonka than wellness. Let's just say that on their What is Nestle Doing About Obesity webpage, their Read About Our Nestle Healthy Kids program link gives you a page not found error. The constant corporate drumbeat of overemphasis on physical inactivity appears to be working. In response to a Harris poll question, which of these do you think are the major reasons why obesity has increased, a large majority chose lack of exercise, while only 34% chose excess calorie consumption. That's actually been identified as one of the most common misconceptions about obesity. The scientific community has come to a fairly decisive conclusion that the factors governing calorie intake more powerfully affect overall calorie balance. It's more our fast food than our slow motion. There's even considerable debate in the scientific literature as to whether changes in physical activity have had any role whatsoever in the obesity epidemic. The increase in caloric intake per person is more than enough to explain the obesity epidemic in the United States, and around the rest of the world as well. In fact, if anything, the level of physical activity over the last few decades has actually slightly gone up in both Europe and North America. Ironically, this may actually be as a result of the extra energy it takes to move around our heavier bodies, making it a consequence of the obesity problem rather than the cause. Formal exercise is only a small part of our total daily activity, though. Think about how much more physical work people used to do in the workplace or on the farm, right? Or even in the home. It's not just the shift in color from blue to white. Increasing automation, computerization, mechanization, motorization, and urbanization have all contributed to increasingly more sedentary lifestyles over the last century. But that's the problem with the theory. The occupational shifts and advent of labor-saving devices has been gradual and largely predated the dramatic recent rise in weight gain the world over. Washing machines, vacuum cleaners, and the Model T were all invented before 1910. Indeed, when put to the test using state-of-the-art methods to measure energy in and energy out, it was caloric intake, not physical activity, that predicted weight gain over time. The common misconception that obesity is mostly due to the lack of exercise may not just be a benign fallacy. Personal theories of causation appear to impact people's weight. Those who blame insufficient exercise and are significantly more likely to be overweight, put them in a room with chocolate and they can be covertly observed consuming more candy. Those holding that view may be different in other ways, though. You can't prove cause and effect until you put it to the test. And indeed, people randomized to read an article implicating inactivity went on to eat significantly more sweets than those reading about research that indicted diet. A similar study evidently found that those presented with research blaming genetics subsequently ate significantly more cookies. The paper was entitled "An Unintended Way in Which the Fat Gene May Make You Fat."
I'd say the vast majority. Wait, let me share screen. Let me just leave off the share screen. The vast majority of people do think that exercise, a lack of exercise, is the primary reason for obesity. Especially this became really evident after the pandemic. People are like, oh, I sat around and did nothing for a lot of the pandemic, and so that's why I gained 20 pounds. And it may be part of it, but I bet your diet really suffered, and that happened during the pandemic. People were at home, and you think they would cook more, but they sat around. ended up getting a lot more processed foods too. So I think people have a hard time teasing those things out, and I think doctors do too. I was last Wednesday, I was talking to a doctor that I work with, and this doctor said that something about, I can't remember the exact comment, but it was exactly this. It was like, well, that person is overweight or obese because this person must not be exercising. And it's a part of it, but it's just that the answer is usually much more complicated, number one, but usually the first thing you should jump to is what are they eating? It's not they're not exercising enough. That is an important thing, no doubt. And definitely there. Any thoughts about exercise versus diet, you guys? Anything?
Well, you guys all knew my story. I was rode my bicycle 7,000 miles when I was 46 pounds heavier, and then after I went whole food plant-based, the next year I only rode my bike 3,000 miles, and so I exercised 60% less, and I lost all the weight because I fixed the food.
Yeah, that's classic. That's a great. You're the walking example. No, thanks. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to also. Oh, Joan has a question or a comment.
So I'm thinking about Kristen's input and engaging kids. And one idea is, instead of making a fun trip to a McDonald's, make a fun trip at this time of year to a fruit stand.
Yeah.
Or getting kids to actually experience picking fruit, picking cherries, picking strawberries, picking blueberries. And then another thing is involving kids in preparation, so that kids are getting excited about what they put in a smoothie, or gardening and picking plants from, oh, look how much it grew and how exciting that is.
Excellent. Yeah, Dave and Sherry has the hands up.
So I found that when I started losing my weight, I had to first lose the weight before I could really start exercising. I mean, at 195 pounds, I couldn't go out running very well. And, it's hard on the knees and everything. But once I started losing the weight, then I was able to exercise. So diet is definitely more important than exercise.
Good point. All right. I'm not shared yet, am I? No.
Yeah, you're shared.
I'm shared?
Yeah, we see Better's obesity pathophysiologic.
Yeah, so pathophysiologic is a big word. But let me just tell you that there's physiology and there's pathophysiology. Physiology is how the body works normally. And we study that first in medical school. The second thing we study in medical school is pathophysiology, which is how the body shouldn't work. That's called disease. That's when the body is not doing the right thing. And so those are the two ideas. Why I'm bringing this up is because people have the notion that obesity is somehow pathophysiologic, that it's not doing, the body's not doing the right thing. Well, really, it's not pathophysiology when your body's doing exactly what they're supposed to do, which is in the face of ultra-processed, extremely calorically dense foods. These foods are nutrient poor, poor in fiber, high in fat, salt, and processed sugars, and they cause your appetite to be deranged. And they, when you're exposed to those kind of foods, your body is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, which is to store it. And the appetite suppressing medicines that we're talking about, the Wegovy and all these semaglutides, all the different ones. What are the different ones? Wegovy and what else, Scott?
Ozempic, Mounjaro.
Yeah.
Trulicity, Victoza.
Yes, a lot. And these are like the most popular drugs being put out there. It's hard sometimes to find these drugs. And so the appetite suppressing medicines like that cost $1,400 to $2,200 per month, and have zero long-term benefits. So you got to continue to take it. Otherwise, it's not going to work anymore unless you've somehow fixed your, it's giving you the impetus to change your diet. So it has no long-term benefits. So you got to keep taking this thing for, if you can imagine, you put a kid on this, they might be on it the rest of their life. They might be on it for 90 years. And that's just not tenable. But after a year of continuous treatment, 10 to 20% of weight loss is expected as the long-term, as the medicine, when the medicine is continued. And drug companies love that, of course, that this medicine has to be continued. Of course, if this is a medicine that you only took for 6 months and then we're done with it, it wouldn't be that interesting of a medicine to the drug companies. So that is, they love the fact that this is considered a disease. And so my point is that the body is doing, it's not really, it shouldn't really be considered a disease. It is considered a disease. It's now a diagnosis, of course, but really, is it? Because that's what the body is doing anyway. So, I bring that up because that's an important issue. This is what the body is doing, and we need to think about, well, how do we get the body to act right? What do we do? And we all know the answer to that, so I'm not going to go into that too much. But I want to go into video number 4, Sky. If you could, let me see if I can stop share and give you the reins. Okay. Let's see. Someone talk. Yeah, can someone talk for me? Joan, can you say something?
Yeah.
Oh,
can you hear me?
Yeah. Hold on, I got to make host. There we go. Yes, there we go. All right, your host. Sorry, this is so clunky, guys.
It's okay. It's going okay.
Yeah.
Identical twins don't just share DNA, they also shared a uterus. Might that also help account for some of their metabolic similarities? Fetal overnutrition, evidenced by an abnormally large birth weight, seems to be a strong predictor of obesity in childhood and later in life. Could it be you are what your mom ate? A dramatic illustration from the animal world is the crossbreeding of Shetland ponies with massive draft horses. I mean, either way, the offspring are half pony, half horse, but in the pony uterus, they come out much smaller. Thank heavens for the poor pony. This is presumably the same reason why the mule, donkey dad and mare, is larger than the hinny, stallion and donkey mom. The way you test this in people is to study the size of babies from surrogate mothers after in vitro fertilization. Who do you think most determines the birth weight of a test tube baby? The donor mom, who provided all the DNA, or the surrogate mom, who provided the intrauterine environment? When it was put to the test, the womb won. Incredibly, a baby born to an obese surrogate mother with a skinny biological mom may harbor a greater risk of becoming obese than a baby from a big biological mom born to a slim surrogate. The researchers conclude the environment provided by the mother is more important than her genetic contribution to birth weight. The most compelling data comes from comparing obesity rates in siblings born to the exact same mother before and after her bariatric surgery. Compared to their brothers and sisters born before the surgery, those born when mom weighed about 100 pounds less had lower rates of inflammation, metabolic derangements, and most critically, 3 times less risk of developing severe obesity, afflicting 35% of those born before the weight loss compared to 11% born after. The researchers conclude these data emphasize how critical it is to prevent obesity and treat it effectively to prevent further transmission to future generations. But wait. Mom had the same DNA before and after surgery. She passed the same genes down. How could her weight during pregnancy affect the weight destiny of her children any differently. Darwin himself admitted that the greatest error he committed had been not allowing sufficient weight to the direct action of the environment, like food, independently of natural selection. We finally figured out the mechanism by which this can happen: epigenetics. Epigenetics, literally meaning above genetics, layers an extra level of information on top of the DNA sequence that can be both affected by our surrounds and potentially passed on to our children. And this is thought to explain the developmental programming that can occur in the womb depending on the weight of the mother, or even your grandmother. Since all the eggs in your infant daughter's ovaries are already pre-formed before birth, a mother's weight status during pregnancy could potentially affect the obesity risk of her grandchildren, too. Either way, you can imagine how this could result in an intergenerational vicious cycle where obesity begets obesity. Is there anything we can do about it? Well, breastfed infants may be at lower risk for later obesity, though the benefits may be confined to exclusive breastfeeding, as the effect may be due to growth factors triggered by exposure to the excess protein in baby formula. The breastfeeding data is controversial, though, with charges leveled of a white hat bias. That's the concern that public health researchers might disproportionately shelve research results that doesn't fit into some goal for the greater good, in this case preferably publishing breastfeeding studies showing more positive results. But of course that's coming from someone who works for an infant formula company. Breast is best regardless. Its role in the childhood obesity epidemic just remains arguably uncertain. Prevention may be the key. Given the epigenetic influence of maternal weight during pregnancy, a symposium of experts on pediatric nutrition concluded that planning of pregnancy, including prior optimization of maternal weight and metabolic condition, offers a safe means to initiate the prevention rather than treatment of pediatric obesity. Easier said than done, but overweight moms-to-be may take comfort in the fact that after the weight loss in the surgery study, even the moms who gave birth to kids with 3 times lower risk were still, on average, obese themselves, suggesting weight loss before pregnancy is not an all-or-nothing proposition.
It's an interesting video. And we may have time for one more little section. Yeah, I wonder, Scott, if you could keep it and just play number 5 for me.
Oh, sure.
Just so we don't have to switch back and forth again.
We seem to have become inured to the mortal threat of obesity. If you go back in the medical literature a half-century or so, when obesity wasn't just run-of-the-mill, the descriptions are much more grim. Obesity is always tragic, and its hazards are terrifying. But it's not just obesity. Of the 4 million deaths every year attributed to excess body fat, nearly 40% of the victims are just overweight, not obese. According to 2 famous Harvard studies, weight gain of as little as 11 pounds from early adulthood through middle age increases risk of major chronic diseases such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. The flip side, though, is that even modest weight loss can have major health benefits. What's the optimal BMI? The largest studies in the United States and around the world found that having a normal body mass index, a BMI from 20 to 25, is associated with the longest lifespan. Put all the best available studies with the longest follow-up together, and that can be narrowed down even further to a BMI of 20 to 22. That would be about between 124 to 136 pounds for someone who stands 5'6". You can pause the video here to use this unisex chart to see what your optimal weight might be based on your height. But even with a normal BMI, the risk of developing chronic diseases, such as type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and several types of cancer, starts to rise towards the upper end, even starting as low as a BMI of 21. A BMI of 18.5 and 24.5 are both considered within the normal range, but a BMI of 24.5 may be associated with twice the heart disease risk compared to 18.5. Look at this diabetes graph among women. A 5-fold difference in diabetes rates, all within the so-called ideal range under 25. Just as there are gradations of risk within a normal BMI range, there is a spectrum within obesity. Class 3 obesity, a BMI over 40, can be associated with a loss of a decade of life or more. At a BMI greater than 45, such as a 5'6" person at 280 pounds, life expectancy may shrink to that of a cigarette smoker. There are, however, so-called obesity skeptics that argue that the health consequences of obesity are unclear or even greatly exaggerated. They are a motley bunch, ranging from feminists, queer theorists, and New Ageists to far-right-wing pro-gun, pro-America websites, where the idea is that obesity alarmists are nanny-state communists who simply want to stop us from having fun. Unlike activists who, for example, organize to raise consciousness and stamp out the AIDS epidemic, the size acceptance movement appears to have the opposite goal, rallying for less public awareness and treatment of the problem. They do have good slogans, though. We're here, we're spheres, get used to it. I'm all for fighting size, stigma, and discrimination. I have a whole section on weight stigma in my new book. But the adverse health consequences of obesity are an established scientific fact. Can't you be fat but fit? In a study of more than 600 centenarians, those living over 100, only about 1% of the women and not a single one of the men were obese. But there does appear to be a rare subgroup of obese individuals who don't suffer the typical metabolic costs, such as blood pressure and cholesterol. This raised the possibility that there may be such a thing as benign obesity or healthy obesity. It may just be a matter of time, though, before the risk factors develop. And even if they don't follow long enough, even quote-unquote metabolically healthy obese individuals are at increased risk of diabetes, and fatty liver disease, and cardiovascular events such as heart attacks and/or premature death. Bottom line, there is strong evidence that so-called healthy obesity is a myth. Many fat activists try to downplay the risk of obesity, even as they may be among the epidemic's greatest victims. Lynn McAfee is the director of medical advocacy for the Council on Size and Weight Discrimination, and routinely takes part in obesity conferences and government panels on obesity. I'm not actually particularly that interested in health, she's quoted as saying, and God, I hate science. There was a book originally published in the 80s and then repeatedly republished entitled Dieting Makes You Fat. Since most people who lose weight go on to regain it, the concern is that there may be adverse health consequences of so-called yo-yo dieting. This idea emerged from animal studies that showed, for example, detrimental effects of starving and refeeding obese rats. This captured the media's attention, leading to a pervasive common belief about the dangers of weight cycling, discouraging people from even trying. Even the animal data is inconclusive, though. For example, weight cycling mice makes them live longer. Most importantly, though, a review of the human data concluded that evidence for an adverse effect of weight cycling appears sparse, if it exists at all. Bottom line, yo-yo dieting is better than none. Ideally, we'd get down to a BMI of 20 to 22, but body mass index doesn't take the composition of the weight into account. For example, bodybuilders are heavy for their height, but can be extremely lean. The gold standard measure of obesity is percentage body fat, but an accurate calculation can be complicated and expensive. All you need to measure BMI is height and weight, but it may underestimate the true prevalence of obesity. The World Health Organization defines obesity as a body fat percentage over 25% in men, or 35% in women. At a BMI of 25, which is considered just barely overweight, body fat percentages in a representative U.S. sample of adults varied between 14% and 35% in men and 26 and 43% in women. So you could be normal weight, but actually obese. Using the BMI cutoff for obesity, only about 1 in 5 Americans were obese back in the 90s. But based on their body fat, the true proportion, even back then, was closer to 50%. Half of Americans, not just overweight, but obese. So just using BMI, doctors may misclassify more than half of obese individuals as being just overweight or even normal weight and miss an opportunity to intervene. The important thing is not the label, though, but the health consequences. Ironically, BMI appears to be an even better predictor of cardiovascular disease death than percentage body fat. I mean, that suggests that excess weight from any source, fat or lean, may not be healthy in the long run. The lifespan of bodybuilders does seem to be cut short. They have about a third higher mortality rate than the general population. The average age of death was around 48 years old. But this may well be due in part to the toxic effects of anabolic steroids on the heart. Preeminent nutritional physiologist Ansel Keys, after which K-rations were named, suggested the mirror method. If you really want to know whether you are obese, just undress and look at yourself in the mirror. Don't worry about our fancy laboratory measurements. You'll know. All fat is not the same, though. There's the pinchable superficial flab that you may see jiggling about your body, but then there's the riskier, deeper visceral fat, which coils around and infiltrates your internal organs. Measuring BMI is simple, cheap, and effective, but does not take into account the distribution of fat on the body, whereas waist circumference can provide a measure of the deep underlying belly fat. Both BMI and waist circumference can be used to predict the risk of death due to excess body fat, but even at the same BMI, there appears to be nearly a straight-line increase in mortality risk with widening waistlines. I mean, someone with normal weight central obesity, meaning someone not even overweight according to BMI, but fat around the middle, may have up to twice the risk of dying compared to even someone who's obese according to their height and weight. This is why the current recommendations recommend measuring both BMI and waist circumference. This may be especially important for older women, who lose approximately 13 pounds of bone and muscle as they age from 25 to 65, while quadrupling their visceral fat stores. Men tend to only double. So even if a woman doesn't gain any weight based on the bathroom scale, she may be gaining fat. What's the waistline cutoff? Increased risk of metabolic complications start at an abdominal circumference of 31.5 inches in women and 37 inches in most men, though closer to 35.5 inches for South Asian, Chinese, and Japanese men. The benchmark for substantially increased risk starts at about 34.5 inches for women and 40 inches for men. Once you get over an abdominal circumference of about 43 inches in men, mortality rates shoot up about 50% compared to men with 8-inch smaller stomachs, and women suffer 80% greater mortality risk at 37.5 inches compared to 27.5 inches. The reading of a measuring tape may translate into years off one's lifespan. The good news is, the riskiest fat is the easiest to lose. Your body appears smart enough to preferentially shed the villainous visceral fat first. Although it may take losing as much as 20% of your weight to realize significant improvements in quality of life for most individuals with severe obesity, your disease risk drops almost immediately. At 3% weight loss, just like 6 pounds for someone weighing 200 pounds, your blood sugar control and triglycerides start to get better. At 5%, your blood pressure and cholesterol improve. Just a 5% weight loss, about 10 pounds for someone starting at 200, may cut your risk of developing diabetes in half.
All right, I forgot how adult-focused that last one was, and also was really long. Sorry about that. But any other, getting back to kids, any other thoughts about children's obesity and how we stamp out this epidemic? I like the idea of marketing the good way. I think that's important. You'll,
I had forgotten, I haven't seen that video for quite some time, and about how you can be a normal BMI and still be at significant increased risk.
yeah.
So that kind of opened my eyes again a bit this evening. Thanks
Yeah.
for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scott, could you let me share again with one last thing I just want to
Oh,
share?
sure.
It's
Now Charlie would have to make Eric a host again. I made Charlie host
Oh,
just
yeah.
so he could have a meeting.
I'll pass it back to you. It's like,
Okay.
it's like
So
how
Eric, here is, I'll make you a host there.
okay. All right, let me share my screen real quick. Last thing I want to do is just share this this right here, which is actually a video that's on, it's on Tubi, Tubi, you know, the Tubee, is it? No, Tubi. It's that free channel. But this is the kids menu, which is a really good video movie documentary about how we can help kids sort of overcome this epidemic by really looking at schools, looking at one particular program in the schools that's been done in San Diego, but also looks at all the issues, not just that issue, not just the school issue. That's one that I think is the most important out of this whole movie. So yeah, check that out for free. And I think that is it. Any other thoughts or concerns?
Good presentation.
Yeah.
All righty. One thing that I should want to say, that AAP recommendations from last year, the AAP recommendation about the surgery and the medicine, one thing they talk about several times is the importance of not fat shaming, which is really, really important. So this kid that I saw today, this 11-year-old that was almost 300 pounds, just was bullied like crazy for the first half of the school year. The second half was different when he went to the school counselor, and at the recommendation of the pediatrician who was taking care of him then, went to the school counselor. The school counselor then elevated this whole concern to the teachers and principal, and they were able to actually stop the bullying in its tracks. He said he had a much better end of the year. So huge difference. And really, that fat shaming is not just kids on kids. That really happens all throughout the ages. It could be grandpa coming over making fun of the kid for being fat. It could be parents, you know, just not doing subtle things that promote the other normal weighing kids in the family and knocking down the one that's larger. There's all kinds of ways to fat shame, but that's one thing that they talked about in this article that really took some something home with. So I'll leave that. Just remember that. Don't fat shame, kids. All right.
Thanks again, Eric.
What is next week?
Next week is an open forum.
Hmm.
So we could, people can bring whatever questions. We could discuss this more if people have questions, since we're running late or whatever. Yeah.
I'll be there. Yeah. Oh yeah, we didn't really have time to go for more questions. All right, well, next time then.
Okay, everybody.
All right.
For coming and presenting,
thanks, Eric.
and we'll catch you the next time around.
All right.
All righty.
Thanks,
Take
Eric.
care.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thanks.